Right. Good afternoon, all. My name is Ronan McCarthy. I'm your host. I'm from TEKenable, and delighted for you all to join us today um, on Cloud for Sustainability webinar. And we've got some great people here to listen to and share some of their experiences and what's happening in the world. We're hoping to record this session, so I hope there's no objections to recording it. And if there are, please just flag it. Our speakers today are John Curran from Blue Planet. We've got Peter Rose from TEKenable. We've got Aisling Curtis from Microsoft, and we've got Ritika Adlakha from Microsoft as well. So I'm just going to reference those in the slide deck. Very conscious of time here, and very conscious of your time as well. So we're going to be really quick and move forward. We're going to focus on questions and answers towards the end of the presentations. And please, if you could use the chat session to capture any questions you have related to slides, and we will gather that information together. And at the end, we'll put your questions forward and present them to the correct individual. Okay. So without further ado, I want to reference, I suppose, what the agenda is. So John will obviously be up first, followed by Peter, and then Aisling and Ritika, just in terms of the specific topics that we're focusing on. So we will hand over to John now to introduce himself and carry out his presentation.
Okay, so let's hope this works. Good morning, everybody. John Curran. I presume you can see the slides now as they're shown. So very quickly, I've worked in sustainability for over 20 years. Can you see my first slide there? Just so as we're sure. Yeah, good. So yeah, worked in the space for 20 years. Worked in large businesses. Now work with lots of clients across many sectors. My business, we focus on helping leaders to navigate the complexity of sustainability. It's a very complex and noisy space. And what we try to do is make it as simple as possible, help them to identify their clear priorities, build their robust foundations, and then accelerate their progress. In terms of the sustainability landscape, I've called out 5 key areas, and there are many more, but for today, let's focus on 5. Clearly, we're in the midst of a climate crisis, and it's timely that we're in the midst of COP27 right at this point in time. But we're also in the midst of an ecosystem and biodiversity crisis. We're seeing a change in society as people become more vocal about sustainability and more active on sustainability. You'll have seen all of the various protests, anti-oil protests in recent days, and I think we will see more of these in time. I think equally we've seen a lack of political leadership globally. We've seen people working towards a populist agenda and often not really focused on sustainability, and that's why I think in many cases it's business leaders that are actually taking the lead as regards sustainability. Some of the best progress is being made by business. And then finally, I think in response to that demand from a societal change, we're starting to see more green policies and the greening of government, as I call it there. Again, this is a very busy slide, so I won't labor it. But essentially, when you look at the stark facts, we've seen over a 1 degree rise in temperature over the last 100 years. And we talk about 1.5 degrees. We've already used about 1.1 of that 1.5 ceiling. So the space to 1.5 is not very much, and the likelihood is that we won't keep global temperatures below a 1.5 degree rise. Why is that important? It's because in human history, yes, the planet has been warmer and cooler over millennia, but in human history, we've not reached the temperatures that we're heading towards now, and there's that fear that it will precipitate huge changes, and these changes are already underway. We see them annually with heat waves and with droughts and all the rest. And essentially, what's really happening is that the climate is becoming more unstable. Extremes are becoming more the norm, and that's leading to things like, apart from the financial destruction that these weather events are causing, it's also causing things like hardship for developing countries, migration, conflict, poverty, famine. So it's not a great news story. If it keeps going in this direction, we move into more and more instability. If you take a planet that's already struggling to keep itself in terms of climate change, then add to this population growth. We're now touching 8 billion in terms of population, and over the next 30 years, we can expect to hit 10 billion. What that means, in a sense, is that we're looking at 50% increase in demand for both food production and energy, but also a 40% increase in water and transportation. And you might ask, well, if population's only increasing by 25%, why are these increases so much larger? They're much larger because what we're also seeing is the emergence from poverty of a lot of people in developing countries. So as people move out of poverty into the new middle class, they consume more. So there's greater demand for energy, for transport, for heating, for food, for all of that sort of thing. So you've got the background of a planet that's under pressure, but then we're increasing that pressure by increasing demand and consumption. So that's why sustainability and ESG are now an issue for every business and every organization. You know, every person on this call will have at least one of these stakeholders. Investors want to know when they're investing in businesses that their money and their investments are going to be secure. Customers want to do business with businesses that do the right thing. Lenders want to green up their loan books, and they also want to de-risk their loan books. Similarly, insurers are looking to de-risk. So they want to know that the businesses that they're insuring understand climate risks and are prepared for them. Regulators, similarly, are issuing a whole raft of new legislation, and we'll talk about some of that in the next few slides. NGOs are very active in that whole area. You'll have seen over the last number of days the number of not only NGOs, but activists at a local level. Employees want to work for businesses that do the right thing, and society at large expects business and expects organizations to do the right thing. So in summary, businesses, both from a business to business perspective, but also in business to consumer, they're under greater scrutiny. Stakeholders expect greater transparency. They want authenticity. They don't want people talking and waffling about all nice to do stuff. They want to see real action. And there's also a degree of dependency, because as people want to become more sustainable and live more sustainable lives, and as businesses want to be more sustainable, they're looking to the businesses that they do business with to do the right thing on their behalf and to help them to become more sustainable. If you get this wrong and you talk about it but don't do anything and show evidence of meaningful action, then you risk being accused of greenwashing. And we've seen some high-profile cases recently, KLM, AWS, a whole load of businesses that have been called out for greenwashing. Again, I won't labor this. One of the things I do when I'm working with clients is really trying to understand where they are, what's their current reality, and what's their ambition. Not every business wants to be the greatest business in the world in terms of sustainability, but everybody has some kind of an ambition. So it's understanding where are we now and where do we want to get to. And this is usually a good way of doing that. Also, it helps businesses to see the good things that they may already be doing, because often people think they're coming to this with a completely blank canvas. They may already have things that they're doing that are good, and it's about bringing them all together. This is then a very quick framework of what sustainability framework might look like. So you've got, on the left there, you've got the Venn diagram, which is around sustainability, environment, social, economic. So you're not sustainable if you're not addressing all of these impacts. Some businesses go down the route of addressing only the climate and environmental impacts, but you need to look across the social, environmental, and economic. And I've shown there what key outcomes might look like, and regardless of what sector you're in, the fundamentals remain more or less the same, and then it's tweaked for particular sectors. You'll also be familiar, I suppose, there's that duality between sustainability and ESG, and which is which, and what is, what matters. The reality is, I suppose, ESG and sustainability are two sides of the same coin, in my view. ESG is favoured by the investment and the financial community, mainly as a way to address this tendency to lean towards environmental impacts rather than looking at things like the social impacts and the governance impacts and how businesses are structured and run. So when you're developing a strategy, it's important to make sure that you cover all of the material impacts that a business has and all of the impacts that are material to the business as well. So climate change, for instance, businesses have an impact on climate change, but they're also impacted by climate change. So making sure that first of all, you complete the matrix in a way that is relevant to the sector and to the business, and addresses all of the impacts, both inward and outward. You'll have talked or heard a lot about regulation, and it's talked about in the trade, I suppose, as the alphabet soup of regulations. There are so many acronyms. Even people like me who work in this in the space, you sometimes have to stop and think, which one are we talking about here? But I think when you start down the bottom of the pyramid here, building a strategy and building a program around sustainability, you start to look at things like the UN Sustainable Development Goals. It's a really good holistic blueprint for how to start building a structure to your program. When you move up a level to the midsection here, you're into reporting frames, and this is how you start to demonstrate how your performance is and how and the successes that you're having within your, and the failures likewise in your operations. And what some businesses do is they take one of these standards and they reverse engineer it to create the framework that they need to build their strategy. When you get up to the top of the pyramid, you're into areas like the EU taxonomy, which is a series of standards and definitions for what is sustainable. So it's a harmonization effort. Many of the businesses that are in the finance sector will be familiar with the Sustainable Finance Disclosures Regulations, which lays down reporting requirements for businesses that are operating in that space. But coming down the tracks pretty rapidly is the CSRD, which is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. And what that's trying to do is take the EU taxonomy, take all of the EU regulations, and then create a harmonized approach to reporting, so that when businesses are reporting on their performance, particularly their financial performance, that they have to include in their annual reports their risks and opportunities and actions around sustainability. So what it's doing is it's moving it into a formal, regulated, harmonized, and structured approach. So you'll see much more about the CSRD. If you haven't already heard of it, you'll see much more of it in the next number of years. So essentially then, in trying to get to a situation where your business is equipped to deal with all of the challenges, I look to help businesses to develop their and articulate their vision. So where do we want to go? What do we want to do in terms of a business? Then we help them to define the key pillars of their strategy, to build out the key elements of those pillars, to test it. And this is an iterative approach, so you're not waiting till the end to test it, you're testing as you go. But there does need to be a point at which you test your vision and all of your assumptions with your board, with your stakeholders. And then in case of, once it's signed off, embedding it, developing your roadmap, developing your plans, your KPIs, your targets. So then, at the end of all of this, why do you do this at all? Well, clearly a business that runs its sustainability strategy properly or runs its business in a sustainable way will differentiate itself. And in a competitive marketplace, you need every little bit of an edge that you can get. So it's important that businesses are clear about what their goals are and clear about delivery. It also demonstrates leadership. It demonstrates compliance and facilitates compliance. So if you're having to comply with the CSRD in years to come, the fact that you have a robust sustainability strategy will actually help you and support you in complying, and that you're not starting from the bottom. Sustainability in ESG is a reputation enhancer, but it's a double-edged sword. It's equally a destroyer of reputation. So if you get this wrong or you greenwash it, then you leave yourself open to having your reputation damaged. Similarly, it's what your stakeholders want. A lot of people are can't yet articulate what they want, but as time moves on, more and more businesses are certainly articulating what they expect of their supply chain and their value chain. So stakeholders want it, and your banks, lenders, insurers, as I've said, all want it. It helps you drive innovation. Employees want it because employees want to work for businesses that do the right thing. They want to be proud for who they work with. Similarly, as a way of recruiting talent, graduates coming into businesses, they want to know that the business they work in share their values. It's also an opportunity to make your business leaner, more efficient, so take cost out, and ultimately, if you take cost out, you drive profitability. So that's a whistle-stop tour of sustainability. We could talk for 3 or 4 hours on this topic, but I'm going to hand back to Ronan now for the next section. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Great stuff. So without further ado, we'll pass on to Peter for the next stage. Peter, do you want to grab control?
I have control. Thank you very much. I just want to say thanks to John. John is a consultant that TEKenable's been working with. We've we've been taking sustainability for the last year and a bit very seriously, and John has helped us to do things like create our carbon baseline, and also to create our ESG policies, which we sort of live and die by in the business now. So what I want to do is just move on. So obviously I'm here to talk about sort of data center cloud migration, but I want to make it clear first of all that we're not just talking about migrating whole data centers. That's a huge undertaking. Very, very rarely does somebody take an entire data center and move it to the cloud. It does happen. More often what happens is people put a toe in the water and they start with, you know, a small set of servers or a discrete set of services, etc., and they move those. The common drivers that you can see on the screen there for data center or stroke server migration, the main ones actually increase business agility. So I don't know how many people have worked in banks and financial institutions, but certainly my experience has been that if you ask for a server for a new project, for example, your project had better be longer than 3 months, because that's how long it's going to take them to give you a new server. The agility that you get with cloud, the flexibility to stand up infrastructure, to try something out, to pull the infrastructure down again, etc., is unparalleled. You just can't achieve that in any other type of scenario. So business agility tends to be a really big driver. Supply chain issues. Again, I'm hearing noises from the market, people that are placing multi-million euro, multi-billion pound orders with some of the big suppliers of particularly networking equipment, for example, are finding the orders are being accepted and then they're being told that there's a delay of 1 to 2.5 years to actually fulfill that order. So supply chain issues are a big issue arising and a big drag on your ability to stand up new infrastructure or indeed refresh or replace your existing. The data center providers, the likes of Microsoft, etc., have such buying power and such large existing implementations that they don't really suffer that issue. Cost and capacity optimization, we're all familiar with this. It's the, you know, scale up when needed, scale down when not needed type of approach to cloud. And if you buy in a fixed infrastructure and you place it in your basement or in your data center, that is your capacity. You're not going to scale it up, you're not going to scale it down. You have bought your capacity, and therefore you have to buy for what you need as the highest scale you're going to achieve. And the rest of the time, the infrastructure is running at less than optimal performance. So that is another big driver, is the ability to match the consumption, the power that you're using, whether that's compute or storage, to your actual need, as opposed to buy for max capacity. And then, of course, the costs of that infrastructure track in the cloud with your usage, and not static based upon what you need as the peak performance. Access to advanced cloud services. Well, there are many services in the cloud that we help our customers to use, from AI to advanced security services, etc., which don't really have their equivalent available on-premise. You can connect them to on-premise, but it's significantly easier to consume them if your services are running in the cloud where they reside in the first place. And then very, very pertinent coming up this winter, ask yourselves the question for your organization: what are you going to do if and when the lights go out during the winter? We're being warmed up, I suppose, by the government and by notifications coming out that there could be issues with supply due to supplier gas issues. And I think something like 40% of Ireland's electricity consumption is driven by gas generated electricity. So the natural assumption is there's going to be some outages. Well, if there's outages, will your services remain online? Will your online services still continue to deal with your customers? Because not the whole country will be out. Some of your customers will still be able to access them, but not if they're on premise, right? And not unless you've got significant power backup. All the Azure data centers have the usual UPS, massive battery arrays, and generators, plus contracted diesel supply. It can run almost indefinitely without a main power supply and still service your customers that have power. Then, of course, the topic of today, sustainability. There is significant opportunity to reduce your carbon footprint by moving to the Azure data center, and that's what I'm going to talk about in the main. So if you look at the journey to cloud maturity, I mean, every organization has a different journey that they undertake, right? But typically what we've seen in the past has been people moving workloads such as backup, file backup, storage type capabilities tends to be a starting point. It's a really easy thing to do. You do your backup and you designate a cloud storage provider. You mightn't think of it as adopting the cloud, but you've just adopted the cloud by doing that. Then what we tend to see is people moving into the Office 365 domain. So they may have the on-premise Exchange servers, that type of thing for email. They move those to the cloud. and make use of that infrastructure and remove some of the infrastructure they have in-house. Now, the ordering can vary, of course, but once you've put your toe into Office 365, you'll find that there are online versions of services that you may very well have on-premise. And the likes of SharePoint can be, in big installations, quite a complex infrastructure to maintain yourselves with SQL servers and web servers and so on and so forth. So moving that to SharePoint Online then gives you the benefit that it's a managed service and you no longer have to worry about the infrastructure patching, etc., etc. So that's a logical step for many organizations. And then we see sort of non-Office 365 type workloads getting virtualized and moved to the cloud. So you may have a bespoke solution running on a Windows server or Linux, indeed, they're equally virtualizable. And that moves into the cloud and you start to have a hybrid implementation where some of your services are in your on-premise infrastructure, some of it in the cloud infrastructure. On that little box there, if anybody recognizes it, then you're as old as me. It's a PDP-9. You would have found those hanging around in very limited quantities in early 1980s. It's actually the first box I ever saw or worked with that was a multi-user server, and an incredible level of disappointment that it had actually no flashing lights on it. I believe this the whole Star Trek story as I was growing up, that all computers had big arrays of flashing lights above them, and this real computer, not one. Really disappointing. But taking actual legacy hardware, taking legacy applications and re-architecting them for the cloud is something we find we get engaged in an awful lot. Re-architecting them, wrapping them in services, making them accessible, giving them APIs, etc., so you can call them from other places, but basically removing them from your on-premise and making use of the cloud services. And then at some point on that journey, most organizations find the advanced services like that's the Azure Sentinel, for example, there, and the AI services and so on and so forth on the cloud come into play. They find great utility at some point in that journey, and where it is varies from organization to organization. So let's have a look, because you need a defined methodology. You can't just sort of dive into this at random. So Microsoft define, and we use the cloud adoption framework as our approach. And that involves defining a strategy. So what are your motivations? What are the business outcomes you want to achieve? Obviously creating a plan. Failure to plan is plan for failure. And then getting ready to do it. So prepping, looking at what they call a landing zone, which is your first piece of architecture or infrastructure you're going to move, what it looks like in the cloud, looking at capacity, so measuring the services you're currently running, and what kind of compute and storage and bandwidth and so on that they are using, so you can create an appropriate environment for them to arrive into the cloud on, all prepared and all scaled and all ready to go. And then the adoption phase of actually migrating some of the workflows and innovating, so maybe making use of cloud services that you don't have available on premise. Inevitably, then there's a management and a governance that requires to wrap around this, but the whole thing is iterative. So the point is, it isn't a big bang, it comes in waves, and you define a wave of migration. We'll bring these services, this infrastructure into the cloud, we'll decommission these other things as a result. Then we'll look at it, we'll reassess what's the next wave, the next wave, the next wave eventually. And each wave has a business case associated with it that shows why you should be doing it. Now, some of the specific savings. So Forrester Research did an assessment to look at energy and carbon consumption across the board in migrations into Azure. And if you look at storage, just storage alone, just moving storage, 71 to 79% more energy efficient in the Azure cloud. The difference in range varies from the type of storage you have, but where it gets really interesting is if you look at the energy taken into account, the energy consumed converts into emissions, the carbon emissions reductions on storage migration to the cloud, 79 to 83% lower than traditional enterprise data center. It does vary. There is a range. It varies depending upon the type of storage you're moving and the type of storage density and type of systems you had, whether they're direct attached storage, which has the highest carbon footprint on premise, or whether they're large, high density NAS arrays, for example, which has the lowest. But the lowest that they're forecasting is a 79% reduction in the emissions. Now that can't be ignored, right? If we look at Exchange Online, then we're about 77 to 85% of the energy, and 97 to 98% lower emissions for Exchange Online versus Exchange on-premise, largely due to the utilization and the density with which that Microsoft within the Azure data centers can pack in the compute, the storage, the bandwidth, and so on and so forth, and the efficiency they can get out of those machines that they're running in the cloud versus the kind of density that you'd have on-premise. But 97 to 98% lower. I mean, if you say that to your sustainability director, they're going to bite your hand off. SharePoint Online savings, 29 to 93, and 72 to 97%. Again, depends upon the size of your farm. Don't worry, I'm going a bit quick. I know you won't be able to read the graphs and get everything out of it, but we will circulate the slides afterwards. And I have a bit of a summary table too. But the point is, with SharePoint Online, because of the complexity of SharePoint, the number of moving parts, the number of services that are required within it, again, Microsoft can highly optimize using the Azure Fabric, the management layers within Azure, the usage of the infrastructure within Azure. And also, it's very important to point out in these graphs at the bottom, you'll see the little or the higher green bar on the bottom right-hand side is Microsoft using grid power, so normal electrical power. But a lot of Microsoft data centers are actually powered by renewable energy, or at least a very high mix of renewable energy. And that renewable energy is considered to generate zero carbon footprint because it's entirely driven from wind or sun or whatever. And therefore, you're not generating any carbon emissions by consuming it. And that gives you that 72 to 97. So then the 72, depending on workload, 97 if you've got the most amenable workload and are using the renewable energy. Finally, compute savings. So compute savings, 52 to 79% in energy. And again, 92 to 98% efficient in terms of the usage. Now, my timer running on my screen tells me I'm done for time, but I've got a couple of slides left, so you bear with me. Summary slide. Again, the type of efficiencies that you will get varies from how you've implemented that workload on-premise stroke in your data center using very high-end infrastructure, very high densities of CPUs, storage, etc. Then you will get a lower saving. But even the lowest saving on that grid is 79%, right? That is absolutely unignorable. And you know, when I ask yourself your question and ask your colleagues the question, what other initiatives can deliver this impact as quickly with all the associated advantages of cloud migration? Because as I called out the head of this, savings in CO2 equivalent carbon emissions is only one of many, many advantages of moving and migrating to the cloud. To support that journey, there are lots of tooling that we can use provided by Microsoft for measuring your current performance on the cloud, on premise, and sizing your necessary infrastructure and deploying automated landing zone deployments, etc., which makes it a much smoother journey. But there's also tools for after you've delivered. So we run, for example, within TEKenable, we have two of these tools running. So we measure our Office 365 Azure consumption. There's a Power BI tool that anybody can go out and deploy. You just Google for it, you'll find it. That will actually give you insight into your emissions generated out of Office 365. Similarly, down the bottom right-hand side, there's an equivalent tool for Azure as well, which will tell you not only the emissions that you're generating from your Azure footprint as it currently stands, but also give a comparison with what it would have been with an on-premise workload. Okay, so you can start to get an assessment of where you stand in terms of your cloud utilization. And then finally, a little bit later in this presentation, Ritika is going to be talking about Microsoft Sustainability Manager, which is a tool that I'll let her describe, but it gives a much broader context in terms of describing your sustainability goals and tracking your progress towards it and capturing data and so on and so forth. So that's me. Thank you very much for listening. Back to you, Ronan.
Thank you, Peter. Good man. I'm going to take control. I'm just waiting on our other colleague. We might actually jump to Ritika now. Oh, Aisling is here. Perfect. Perfect timing, Aisling.
Hello, everyone.
So Aisling, if you would like to take control of the slide deck, if that's okay.
I will. No problem at all.
Over to you.
I'm not sure if you can see that now. Can you? Everybody see? Great. Okay. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me to talk about sustainability, and in particular, to set the context around what we're doing in Microsoft around sustainability. And I'd be really happy to hear any questions or any follow-up on LinkedIn, either really open to it. So the first thing that I wanted to highlight was around our climate and business challenges and then our sustainability journey. And then Ritika is going to bring you through a little bit more detail on the Cloud for Sustainability platform and the actual opportunity to work together going forward. So what are the overall sustainability drivers? I've no doubt many of you will be connected into COP27 in Egypt this week, and there's a lot of discussion about regulation, about investors, financing, the connection around customers, and really these are some of the key, apart from some of the much wider planetary issues which we are all seeing, observing, feeling actually. In Ireland, we probably in one way benefited in terms of a better summer. Having said that, there'd be a lot of farmers who wouldn't appreciate that, and a lot of businesses as well. But in reality, different parts of the world are experiencing much greater impact in terms of the destructive nature, whether it's wildfires, flooding, etc. The overall business sustainability drivers is certainly one of increased regulations. So whether you are affected by the CSRD or the SEC, there are much greater focus from on regulations overall. If you take the CSRD, over 50,000 businesses in Europe are going to be affected by this. So businesses generally are going to have to report and record on their impact from a sustainability point of view. There's growing expectations from investors, and there's actually a lot of research that supports this in terms of the amount that investors are taking the green agenda, whether you're focused on sustainability in terms of access to finance. So this is going to become even more important going forward. The rising consumer demand. So there is a much greater focus from customers. And even in this current context, where we are all facing a much greater focus on energy costs, etc., even from a consumer household point of view, even in that context, consumers are saying that they are looking for much greater focus from brands around sustainability, and they're actually willing to pay more where there is a reduced impact from an environmental point of view, be it on emissions, etc. And then the final thing in terms of the drivers is really around the business case. So there has been a huge amount of work. Deloitte has done a large piece of work forecasting the amount of opportunity around sustainability, the amount of investment, the amount of growth that is available through efficiencies, streamlining operations, supply chain management, etc. So over the next, number of years, there will be serious opportunity from a business point of view. So if you take greater regulation, greater focus in terms of the access to financing and the access through investors, a rise from consumers in terms of requirement around sustainability, and then the actual business case for sustainability is a key driver as well. If you take attracting talent, if you take retaining talent in terms of people wanting to be aligned to organizations that are very purpose driven, this is a key aspect that you need to be thinking about over the next number of years for the health of your business and how you're going to evolve it. Now, there's no doubt there's lots of obstacles, right? And many people that I would be speaking to would be like, well, how do I balance running a business as well as investing for the future. And I suppose one of the things that I would say on this is that a key thing is really working it into your strategy and embedding it into the fabric of the organization, because there's no doubt there's a lot of issues around, you know, a lack of global standards. You only have to look up the number of regulations and standards that relate to sustainability. It is a lot. But even if you focus in on CSRD, the SEC, the UN, like if you even just focus on core ones, there's a lot behind it. Understanding your footprint and then understanding what it is that you need to do, whether it's reduce, remove, recycle, you know, the strategic conversations. But the first thing is to kind of understand your status, and you need support with that, whether it's partnering with somebody or actually building the capability within your organization yourself. But like ideally, it makes sense working with somebody who is actually doing that. No doubt there is a lot of obstacles around manual processes, the value chain, transparency, even ourselves. From a sustainability reporting point of view, we made great strides in Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, but in our Scope 3 emissions, we were learning as well. It's not a linear process. You know, we made strides on it, we took a step back, we made changes, which I'll talk to a little bit later in terms of the learnings. And I think that's one of the things that really comes through in the discussions around sustainability. It is a complex issue, but it isn't linear. It will take steps back as well. You need to learn. You need to actually take part in webinars like this, where you're hearing different perspectives, different insights, and what has worked and hasn't worked. So even in the value chain transparency, there are pluses and minuses in terms of the issues associated with that. Silo data and then capital investment trade-offs. So there's no doubt there's lots of obstacles associated with this. So getting a clear understanding of the plan that you need to develop, the situation you're in, and where you need to move to is very critical at this point. To share a little bit about Microsoft's ambitions around the strategy. And if you're looking at any of the coverage, you'll see Brad Smith, who is our president, on stage and in discussions around COP27. And it is all about our advocacy for sustainability as a topic, ensuring that we are bringing everybody along on that journey and making a clear leadership in the discussions around COP27 as well. So Microsoft will be carbon negative by 2030 and will remove all historic emissions emitted either directly or via electricity consumption by 2050. So there's a lot of discussions around net zero, but when you take into account, actually, we're saying we are working towards a path of net zero in the next number of years, but actually what we're trying to do is get it to a carbon negative perspective by 2030, and then removing all of our historical or the equivalent historical emissions by 2050, which is significant even in terms of ambitions that have been announced. What I would say is we are also on track to do this. As I said, there has been progress, which I will bring you through, and there have been areas of learnings. And I do think that it is a great opportunity to learn from each other, cross-sectoral, cross-industry, in terms of what's working and what's not. That's carbon negative. We're also our goals are to be zero waste, water positive, and to restore more land than we use by 2030. We also announced our 1 billion Climate Innovation Fund, and this is again to try and accelerate the activities and the projects so that we actually start seeing the actions associated with these ambitions and pledges across industry, and we're enabling organizations to do this as well. So investing to build the leading platform technology solutions to environmental challenges. This is our focus around carbon, waste, water, and the ecosystems. And it's not just in terms of our own responsibility and how we aspire to make progress around sustainability. What's also key is that we are trying to enable customers and partners to do this as well. I mentioned the 1 billion over the 4 years, and this is really the reason we're doing this is to try and speed up that development of sustainability technologies. We have allocated about 500 million of that already at this point, which, you know, still there's quite a significant amount still to allocate over the next couple of years. But already we're starting to see projects bring to fruition that maybe wouldn't have been invested in previously. So in terms of our progress, as I mentioned, 571 million has been allocated. In terms of our carbon buy down, over the 2 years since we provided an update on our progress, we had done a purchase 2.5 million tonne. Actually, last year we made the largest purchase of carbon. In terms of our water, we were able, through our partnership with Water.org, we provided more than 95,000 people with access to safer water or sanitation. And then, as you would have read, quite a bit around our circular centres have opened a number and are opening more over the next number of years. And that is a key focus for us in terms of reducing waste. So how we report is, and I mentioned that we produced a sustainability report in 2020. A key thing around this is providing transparency, providing trust about what we're doing, and also showcasing some of the reporting and helping others learn during this process. So we report on against reporting standards, policies and practices, environmental indicators, material issues and governance structures. It is really well worth a read. The chart that I showed just one chart ago is directly from that. So it outlines our ambitions, the progress that we're making, and then the learnings. And I really like the approach on the sustainability report, actually, because Scope 3, as I said, we hadn't made as much progress this year. We strengthened our supplier conduct. We focused on making sure that we had maximum number in scope of those suppliers, part of that supplier conduct, and also actually reporting as well. So we really strengthened that. The other thing we did was we increased the amount of reporting as well, so the frequency, so that people had visibility of the issues around Scope 3 reporting. So I'm hoping now with this year, with the changes that we've made and the learnings that we've shared, that there will be much greater progress again this year. And really, just I suppose the last thing that I wanted to leave you with is that progress depends on a common foundation for accurate, consistent, reliable measurement. And really, if we can do that, if we can work together collectively to do this, I think that that will really help businesses on their journey. And we're here to help and support. I'm going to hand over to Ritika, but I'm really happy to take any questions at the end, or if you want to directly reach out to me on LinkedIn, please do.
Thank you, Aisling. Ritika, over to you. You okay to take control there?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Aisling. Well, Ronan, do you mind sharing your screen again?
Oh, beg your pardon. Yes.
No problem.
Down to you. Okay.
Works. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Very good morning. I'm Ritika Adlakha. I'm a technology specialist for business applications and sustainability. And today I'll be talking about Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability in length. So just like Ashlyn explained, we at Microsoft, we started our sustainability journey over a decade ago, and we continuously are building on our ability to achieve our sustainability goals. Through our experience, we've learned that this seems to be a data problem, which has been confirmed by our customers and telling us every day that managing data is one of the biggest pain points that they've had in their sustainability journey. So, which is why we've built Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability. So I would like to talk more on the architecture of the Cloud for Sustainability, then we'll jump on the demo. So explaining the architecture. So Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability represents a growing set of capabilities that are built on Microsoft Azure and powered by Power Platform, which includes Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power BI. So this stack enables our customers and even partners to extend core capabilities because it's built on Azure and Power Platform and helps them to easily customize solutions, whether it's present in the vertical, horizontal, or geo-based solutions in their industry. So over the past year, we've launched Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability data model, which breaks down data silos because we're picking up data coming in from disparate sources, streamlining the data ingestion so that importing the data at one place becomes easier. We're integrating it with main data systems, calculating, doing all the hard carbon math that is that can be complex to do, and then reporting it because that's the important piece to know where we stand in terms of our sustainability journey and where we intend to go. Talking about Microsoft Sustainability Manager, it's a flexible, extensible solution that's built on Power Platform, and it enables organizations to record, report, and reduce their environmental impact across their operations and value chain. And then Peter actually touched upon emissions impact dashboard that you can use in Microsoft 365 as well as Azure, which helps our customer to know and gives them the transparency to know how much emission Microsoft generates while they're using consumption in terms of Azure or Microsoft 365. So our cloud for sustainability solution story continues to go broader and stronger, which is why we've recently introduced our environmental credit service, which is designed to improve the reliability of environmental claims and credits, and also giving us transparency and the ability to track provenance through credit creation process. Then moving forward, I'll be mainly talking about Microsoft Sustainability Manager today, and specifically these 5 solution areas. So talking about Sustainability Manager, it's important to know when we are using Cloud for Sustainability, what organization is using this product, and to understand their structure, hierarchy of the organization so that we have a blueprint of the organization as to what they're doing to understand their sustainability goals. Moving from there, we go on to the next solution area, which is data ingestion, which is the method basically used to get the data into the platform. So we have inbuilt connectors which connect to different data systems in order to get the data at one place. And then once that is done, we move on to the third solution area, which is the emission calculations. So like I said, we have inbuilt algorithms which help you to do the carbon math so that you don't get into that complex journey and get stuck somewhere. And we can move on to the major part of reporting and insights, which help you to take actionable steps from in order to understand where you are in terms of your sustainability journey and how and what you need to do to achieve the goals and the targets that you've set for next 6 months or for next few years to come. Then how we do that is through our 5th solution area, which is goals and scorecard. It's important. You cannot manage something unless you're measuring it, which is why we are getting the data into the system. We're doing the math and calculations. Then we have reporting, but we have to set a vision in terms of where we'd like to go and how we'd like to achieve our sustainability targets. So that's the solution area to focus on when we're setting up our goals. Now, I'll be doing an end-to-end demo for Sustainability Manager, where we'll be showing you how we set up that company profile, how we do the scorecards and goal setting, and how we get the data into the system and do the calculations, and then how we can get the actionable insights at the end of the day to take our next steps and design our sustainability journey that way. So just a second and I'll start sharing my screen. I hope you can see my screen. Okay, brilliant.
Yes.
So what we have here is the Microsoft Sustainability Manager on the screen. It is giving you an overview of the emissions that have happened in the past 2020 reporting period. And it's also giving you an overview of renewable energy that you might have used in the process. And on the right, we are getting the locations where the company is spread across and how we are collecting the information to show total emissions, revenue intensity, and the renewable energy. So that's an overview, but let's start with the first thing that we talked about, which is the company setup. So as an example, if you've come to any other demos of Microsoft, we have our infamous Contoso company, coffee company that we use to show the examples. So what we have here and how we're doing the structure, setting up the structure of the organization is through setting, basically connecting the information about the company and most importantly their annual reporting period, which will be reflected in the dashboards or the reports that we'll be generating later on in terms of scope 1, scope 2, or scope 3 emissions. So how do we set up the structure is, for example, Contoso Corp here has divisions and departments based in Africa, APAC, and Europe, and as well as US. So we can define that our structure by adding the organizational hierarchy in the structure tab for organizational profile. Similarly, for facilities, to understand where are the sites spread across on the world map, to understand what industries we're talking about when we're dealing with this organization. So all these things help us with understanding where we are in terms of a sustainability journey specific to these locations, so that we can deep dive in and collect the granular data and need to see the steps that we need to take in terms of where the improvement is needed. So once we've set up the company profile, then we go to the data to understand how we import or get the data into this platform, which is through data connections like I talked about. So we have already inbuilt connections here. First thing to understand is what kind of data are we importing into the system? Is it the activity data, which is the raw data, for example, and the amount of fuel that the employees of the companies might have used while they are going to meet their clients. So this is one activity, but to understand how much fuel is used is the activity data. And then once the activity data is into the system, we do the math and the calculations to understand how much emissions were generated by that activity. And then we have pre-calculated emissions, the fact that if you've been in the sustainability journey, you might have already emissions and reports that are saved into your system, but to get it in the sustainability manager, we've to choose pre-calculated emissions data here. So going forward with an example of activity data, for example, if I'm using fugitive emissions, then I go next, and we have a lot of connectors here that just needs to be clicked and plug and played here because they're pre-built into the system. For example, if you've fugitive emissions data stored in an Excel sheet, what you have to do is just click Excel here and then go to the next part, because it just automatically connects to the Power Platform technology that is underneath the Sustainability Manager. So for the purpose of demo, I will go with the demo connector that we have here. And then we move on to the next part where it asks you to verify the connection with the server and the connector type. And then you can here schedule the data import, whether you want to do the data import automatically or want to replace the previously imported data. So if I go with the import data automatically, then I go with the next, and it'll help ask me what kind of connector I want to set up here. So I'm just going to give a test connector name here and move forward with the connection. So that's how easy it is to set up a connection to the system, and then you can import the data coming in from different data sources, but it's actually not making sense unless it's at one place, and then you can have an actionable steps related to it. So once the connections are set up, we go to the calculation models. And we have like I mentioned before, we have already existing algorithms that are present here to do the carbon math, so you don't have to worry about anything to explain, for example, about mobile combustion. So what we'll do is we'll create a connector for mobile combustion so that the data is coming in and collecting all the information that is for particular activity related to mobile combustion. And then we do the carbon math that I was talking about. So it's the volume of greenhouse emissions and their low concentration in the atmosphere makes it hard for us to measure how much accurately emissions are generated for a particular activity. So what we do there is we do multiply the activity into the emission factors and to get the estimate of emission that is created for that particular activity. So what we are doing here is exactly the same carbon math, and on the right hand side we have description of what equations we are using. That depends those are the equations that are coming in from the EPA, which we are currently using, but you are free to customize the factor library yourself to import in any emission factors that you want to import, depending on, say, different geographical location that you're based in and coming in from government guidelines as per the sustainability rules. To make it accurate, we define certain conditions to understand whether the activity data that we're recording, is it for the on-road vehicle? If not, then we use a different formula so that we have accurate results of the emissions that are created. So once we've got the data into the system, we've done the carbon math. Now the next step is to understand what the preview or the overview that I showed in terms of the dashboard, right? But it's important to know these scorecards that I was talking about to understand and keep on track of your sustainability journey. So for example, we have a carbon reduction plan here for 2030. So for Contoso, it's important to reduce carbon reduction from their business unit. And then they have also set in a sub goal for the USA branch and the APAC branch. That's how you set up your goals. And if I go deep into it on the right, you will see the progress that you've made so far in for that specific goal, and on the right you'll get the goal details as to what date it was started and what is the expected end date for this goal. And then in the history you will see when the data was imported for that particular goal, and on the other hand, like what was the status after that data was evaluated, so that you are on track, and also getting the status whether you are at risk of achieving that goal or whether you're on track of achieving that goal, so that you can take certain steps that are needed in terms of achievement of that goal. So I'm going back to the overview that I showed before, which is the dashboard, which is coming in from our brilliant Power BI tool, which is doing all the analytics in the background and showing you the results that are specific to the country region, could be specific to the organizational units that you're running, depending on the divisions and the structure that you've created for your organization, and could be also by the facility that we talked about. It could be different industries that the organization is part of, and you can get all those reporting and everything done in the platform. And the best thing about Sustainability Manager is that it's built on Power Platform. What I've showed so far is the carbon emissions that we're talking about, but we've extended the functionality to water, and we are going to do that for waste as well. And even before Microsoft launches their version of waste or water, what we can do is you're free to use the libraries that are existing in the system and build your own model, your own dashboard. So it's extensible to that level, to giving you the freedom to customize the system which works the best for you and your sustainability journey. So that's all I wanted to cover for today, to giving you a sneak peek of Sustainability Manager. But I hope that helps. And I'd be happy to connect with everyone on LinkedIn if you have any questions, and please feel free to put it on chat. And I'd love to share a few documents that, and even the free trial version that you can use for Sustainability Manager. Thank you.
Thank you kindly, Ritika. That was great. So I'm very conscious we've run over in terms of time. So whether we've got questions or not, and whether my colleagues can actually hang on. We've got a couple of questions here, and the first one I think is maybe aimed at Aisling. Are you seeing an increase in the number of organizations migrating to the cloud, citing sustainability as a key driver?
Sorry, can you say that again to me?
Are you seeing an increase in the number of organizations migrating to the cloud, citing sustainability as a key driver?
Yeah, I am actually. Most organizations, if they are migrating to the cloud, will be able to get savings kind of between 50 and 90% in terms of cost efficiencies when they do it. So there's a genuine business case of doing that. Also, if you take the overall premise of having individual data centers rather than using the scale of cloud economics, like it just genuinely doesn't make sense. So it is one very immediate thing that customers and partners can actually do. So we are actually seeing quite a bit of that in terms of people's first steps, I suppose.
Excellent. This one was for you, Peter. Are there any security concerns with migrating to a cloud environment?
Well, every IT solution that you build carries a degree of cyber risk, right? But there's no increased risk of going to the cloud compared to an on-premise solution. You can perfectly well have an insecure on-premise solution or a secure on-premise solution, just as you can have an insecure cloud solution and a secure cloud solution. The key advantages that you get by going to Microsoft Azure are really two that I can think of on the spot. So the first one is that Azure is protected by Microsoft Global Security Team, and they see global activity and threats, and they're positioned in a way that no smaller organization is ever going to be able to match in terms of their ability to protect the cloud services from the different types of attacks that emerge. But as part of our own implementation, as part of TEKenable sort of approach to migration, we would always undertake a security risk assessment and use best practice in terms of hardening the Azure environment, and then also apply the advanced security services that are available within Azure, the likes of Sentinel, for example, which is a SIEM. We often use automated source and security orchestration and response playbooks, so that as soon as something happens that looks even remotely suspicious, an automated response is there before even a security analyst can get to look at it. And these sorts of tools are typically not available to people that are having on-premise, and they're certainly not as easily available, and they're certainly not as integrated and cross-cooperating between each other. So I would actually argue the cloud is not only secure, but it's capable of being significantly more secure actually than on-premise implementations would be. Yeah. But you do have to approach it with a risk assessment mindset in place.
Okay, I've got a couple more. I'm being quick. This one is for you, John. Who is the best person to drive the sustainability initiative within an organization?
Very good question, Ronan. Very good question. It really has to start at the top. It has to be something that the CEO is regularly heard to talk about. It has to be a board agenda item, and it's got to be owned at the board table. If not by the CEO himself or herself, at least another vice president or director or whatever the senior leadership are. But ownership has to be at the board table, and then individual ownership within the business thereafter.
Okay. Finally, Ritika, how is Sustainability Manager licensed?
Okay, so sustainability manager is licensed per tenant. So if you've ever used Power Apps and Power Platform before, so what we do is like it's similar to a Dynamics 365 tenant license. So you charge per month for a tenant. So it's not per user. What we do is like you buy a tenant and then you can add on as many users as you want. And that's
Great
how it's
stuff.
run.
Great stuff. Okay, I'm very conscious we're 10 minutes over almost. This is a summary of the webinar, so I'm hoping that the audience got good value, and round of applause for our speakers. You've done a great job, so thank you very much. It's difficult sometimes to slot all of this message into a short time frame, so well done. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. All the best. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.